Welcome, everybody. Is this microphone working? Can you hear me coming through the speakers in the back okay? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so our speaker tonight, Dr. Motta, has been in practice at the North Shore Medical Center in Salem, Massachusetts since 1983, recently retiring in 2022. He's a graduate of Boston College with a BS in physics and biology and an MD from Tufts Medical School. He's board certified in internal medicine and cardiology, and he's also an associate professor of medicine at Tufts University School of Medicine. Dr. Motta has long been active in organized medicine, both in the American Medical Association and in the Massachusetts Medical Society. Dr. Motta has a lifelong interest in astronomy and has hand-built a number of telescopes and observatories through the years to do astronomical research, including his entirely homemade 32-inch F6 relay telescope, which he's going to tell us about tonight, located in Gloucester, Massachusetts. He's been awarded several national awards in astronomy, and he has worked on light pollution issues, which he gave a talk here last year, and published several white papers on light pollution as a member of the AMA Council of Science and Public Health. Finally, several years ago, the International Astronomical Union awarded Dr. Motta an asteroid, in part for his work on light pollution, as well as amateur research. And the asteroid is named 133537 Mario Motta. So please give a warm skyscraper welcome, Dr. Mario Motta.
Great. So thank you for the kind introduction and the invitation to speak to you. My pleasure to be here. This year I will not be able to make Astro Assembly. I've got a good reason. I'm going to be the keynote speaker in New Zealand talking about light pollution. And so that's going to be kind of fun. But what I'm here tonight to talk about is not light pollution, but building the observatory. This is my third observatory. I'll show you brief pictures of the previous ones. And this is my biggest and best, and probably the last one I'm going to be allowed to build, according to my wife. I was offered a 50-inch blank, but it weighed 3,500 pounds, and Joyce said no. All right, there we go. So it's been in the sky and telescope. And I've actually brought a couple of copies if you want to keep some for the library here. That was in 2012. According to Sky and Tel, this is the largest completely homemade telescope. There's a few people out west that have 40 inches, 36 inches, but they didn't build every single part like this one. Okay. The only thing I bought was the drive gear and the motors. And this is, it's been in Time magazine and a few other journals. This is the most interesting one. This is in Iran. I don't know if anyone knows Babak Trafeshi. He's the author of The Sky at Night, and he collates that through National Geographic. Anyway, when he was still there, he saw my article and wanted to copy it and use my pictures in Iran. He ran a magazine like Sky and Tel for the Persian language. I said, sure. So we'd send stuff back and forth. It was kind of funny because it always 2 pages of Muslim prayers, the actual material, and two pages of Muslim prayers. He'd send me that to put it around it so we get past his censors, just in case. He managed, his wife was very active in the Green Party, and if you recall, they were being persecuted. They managed to escape to Germany and now lives in the US, and he works for National Geographic. So here is backyard of my scope. I think every house needs an observatory. Here's a little culture. My sky is 4.5, used to be 4, but it still can see the Milky Way. This is the scope. I'll say how I got from here to there. The Meade I was using as a guide scope only. The refractor I built but didn't do the, it's a triplet, which I got from Christian way back around 1990. we were having dinner at Stellafane, and this is before he got famous. He brought up two 6-inch triplets that were Zeiss design. And he was saying he was gonna, he said the glass cost 2,000 and they would have to sell it for more than 10,000 to make a penny on it. So he said, no one's gonna spend that much money. I'm just gonna put it on the swap table tomorrow for 500 each. So I literally jumped on him, wouldn't let him off the ground until he sold me one right then and there. And that's a beautiful scope. And I used that for my wide field. I get over 1.5 degrees with the refractor, and with the 32-inch, visually you can get up to 30 arc minutes. With my camera on it, I get 24 by 16 arc minutes. So let's talk about how we built. So here it is. It's an unusual design. I built Newtonians before, and I had a 32-inch Newtonian up in New Hampshire. We had a lake house up there. And that was a good scope. It was a Newtonian and had coma, like any Newtonian has. I used a coma corrector, but nothing is as good as to actually have an actual good field. So when I was going to build a new scope, feeling more confident, saying I could probably do a better job than the original one I had up there. Scott Milligan, anyone know Scott Milligan here? Okay, so he's a designer of telescopes, and that's his living. And he had a ray trace program, and he came up to me and said, I got a perfect design that has 0 aberrations, perfectly flat field, and a 40 millimeter perfect circle. I said, okay. And you don't have to do a parabola, you can do a sphere. Now, if it was anyone else on the planet, I would have just laughed him off and said, leave me alone. But knowing that he was one of the team that fixed the Hubble, and it works. Remember, the Hubble didn't work at first because it had spherical aberration. So these correctors in the Mangan basically correct the spherical aberration of mirror. Okay, and knowing that it took me 2.5 years to make the parabola just to barely better than 1/4 weight, my first one, second one came out a little better. I was not looking forward to spending a few years grinding and polishing a 32-inch mirror. It takes a lot of work. Spheres are easy. Anyone can get to a sphere. It's just keep polishing and grinding, and it has to come out spherical. You just got to get the right sphere, that's all. So I took him up on his offer, and basically, so I built everything except he did the Mangan. He does really good flats. It's a 20th wave Mangan flat on the back, and I wasn't going to be able to do that. I'm just not great at flats. He built the Mangan, and we both worked on this and the other correctors. The sphere came out 20th wave. It had a little bit of deflection in it. I'll try to show you how we fixed that, because his design was for a 24-inch. And since I already had a 32, I said, I ain't going back to a 24. I want a 32. So he upscaled it. Yep.
I just want to be clear on the design. The primary is F6.
This
The
is
secondary is a flat,
the
right?
primary is F3,
F3.
goes through a Mangan. The Mangan is a curve, a flat on the back, so it's doubly refracted. So it's actually like two lenses here.
Okay.
And the index of refraction was carefully chosen from O'Hara glass from Germany, so that with this design, it eliminated all the spherical aberration. It then goes through a field stop, which is exactly 1.68 inches in diameter. Okay, because that's where the focus should be. This is why it's called a relay.
Yeah.
It then goes through a doublet, a single, and a single. Because this is a single lens, it gets rid of the spherical aberration, but it introduces color aberration.
Right.
So the rest of them is to flatten and to eliminate all color aberrations, and to further flatten out the spherical aberration, the minor aberrations. And back here, it's completely flat, 0 aberrations, no color fringes whatsoever. I could never have designed this. So I followed directions well. So I did build it, but I didn't design it. Have to give credit to Scott Milligan for that. So here's some of the design characteristics and the spacings that we use. So his inspiration came originally not from the space program, but from Don Dilworth. How many people know Don? Okay. He's getting a little elderly now, and his telescope, which was entered, I believe, in 1984 at Stellafane, is now in John Briggs' hands in New Mexico. But this is the picture from 1984, and Don's scope is a relay telescope, very similar to mine. He had a spherical primary. This was a 16-inch. A Mangan secondary, and 3 correctors. Basically, Scott modified this design, added another corrector, and made it even flatter and more perfect with the current design. But that was the original scope with this design. Now, back then, they didn't have really good interference coatings to eliminate. Let me rephrase that. Why can you see a glass? Okay, why can you see that glass? The reason is because light doesn't go completely through it. It's not completely transparent. There's always reflections, right? And in any telescope, unless you have interference coatings on it, you're going to lose about 10% of the light at every interface. So if you're going to build a scope like I have, which has 11 surfaces, you're going to end up with about 50% of the light. In which case, you might as well just build a 24-inch, which is about the same light collection as 50% of a 32. But starting in the late 90s, they had amazing coatings developed, which made this feasible. You know, if you think about it, for the last 100 years, you made telescopes with just few surfaces as possible so that you didn't lose all that light, okay? Which is why no one built telescopes with multiple correctors. But now with these special, and I'm not talking about the coatings you get in binoculars, those still reflect about 3%, 3 to 4% of the light. These coatings that Scott directed me to reflect, I should say transmit 97.7% of the light. You only lose 0.3% per surface, which is it's a miracle. In fact, my correctors, which are coated that way, when you look at it at an angle, they look like they're gold coated and like a mirror. As soon as you hit 90 degrees, they disappear. They literally disappear in your hand. You don't, all you see is a rim. And you drop it if you didn't know you were holding something. That's how good these coatings are. But that's what makes multiple lens, which is why no one copied his design up until the 90s. Okay, because you just lose too much light. But the concept was correct. So here's my way back, my first big scope, a 16-inch, which I got the primary. We just finished medical school. I hadn't been to Stellafane in 5 years because I was in medical school and tied up. And I convinced my wife to go camping right as soon as I finished my year of internship. And we're standing at the swap table, and there were these 2 16-inch blanks. And I started literally crying. And my wife said, "We can't afford it." I just kept staring at it. She finally said, "Get them." So that's what I built with that. And I ground and polished those while I was an intern and resident. That came in 1983, my first big scope. Went pretty well. And that eventually ended up in my first dome in Lynnfield. That's a 14-foot dome, all handmade. That's that same scope now mounted in an English cross axle. And I had a great time using that. Next, I built this dome, my second dome. This is a 18-foot diameter dome. And that went up in New Hampshire. We had a lakeside home. And that was my first 32-inch. This is the glass for my first 32. That actually came from the space program via Mike Matty. I gave the story at dinner time, but I was looking around for a 24-inch. I wanted the next size up. And he shows up at my house literally at night in the dark, opens up his trunk and says, I was told to bring this to a landfill and break it up because it's classified. Landfill, Lynnfield sounds the same, just don't tell anyone where you got it from. So I ended up, it was solid, and I sandblasted the back out and ended up with a lightweight. And that ended up, that mirror is actually now in Italy being used for spectroscopy. It's a long story. I don't have time tonight. But this is my second big scope. This is the 32-inch. It has another 32-inch mirror in it now. And that was, when we got this other observatory and house built, my wife didn't have any interest in really going to New Hampshire anymore because we live now next to a beach. So Arnie Hendon, people know him, he's former director of the ATMOB. He came up to observe one night, we're having dinner, and he goes, I want to find a place, I'm going to retire in a year, I want to find a place just like this, I want to build a scope just like this, and a house just like this on a lake. And my wife and I looked at each other, we were thinking of selling it, Chip, sold. But the good thing is, because my blank now is cast by Peter Wagnus in Arizona, it's 32.25. This one is 32, and I never let Arnie forget that. I still have the largest annoying one. So how do you build an observatory? Well, if you're going to put it up in the air, you got to get it up above the trees and the house. And you can't have any part of that pier touch the house. Otherwise, when I observe, I'd have to tie my wife into bed and not let her move, right? So I knew she wouldn't go for that. So this is a 26-foot pier, and it goes 6 feet into the ground, into bedrock. That went up before anything else. Neighbors were wondering if there was a bridge being built nearby. And yes, every part,
Quick question about that.
yeah,
Did you have to get any special variances or anything for this?
there was a height limit, and I wanted it 6 feet higher because I wanted to get above the house.
Yeah.
So I could look north more, still a little bit obstructed, but not much. So I had to get a variance for that. And City Hall had no idea what an observatory is, even after I explained it 4 or 5 times. So finally, I just said, can you call it a shed? So this is a shed.
Oh.
As far as Gloucester is concerned, this is just a big shed on the house.
Now, do the neighbors have any qualms?
No, they signed and said, fine. I'm not blocking anyone, I'm at the top. So I didn't block anyone's view. So basically, I'd made all the parts ahead of time. It took me 6 months to cut everything out. And the nice thing about the ATMOB, the Amateur Telescope Makers of Boston, is for free beer and pizza, they'll come and work their butts off. So in one weekend, we put that up. Although this is how you make the parts. Use a router around a fixed point and make that adjustable so you can make the curves all identical. And that's the best way. Don't try to use a bandsaw, it'll wiggle. It's got to match exactly. So make lots of parts, as you can see stacked behind me. They come out pretty good. Then you glue them and screw them together. And that's how you make the, this is Bernie Boltz helped me put up the skin after we got the frame up. And here we are. So this is like late November. And in one weekend, working 2 12-hour days, we got the dome up. And this is my wife sitting up front, trying to figure out how the heck we got the dome done in 2 days, and the contractor has spent the month and still haven't finished the roof. But it got done. And here's the finished product. And now I do it basically in my slippers, and I love it. No more shoveling snow to get to the observatory. This is looking north. I have a pretty good horizon, which is one of the reasons I chose this spot. That's Seabrook over here. So it's across Ipswich Bay. And from my vantage point, you can just see Kittery, Maine. That's looking south. Get a little bit of a sky glow right about here from Gloucester, but fortunately, it's a small town and they kind of shut down after around 9:30. And then the south is excellent. The only glow I get is from Boston going this way. I pray for brownouts and blackouts, but that's not too bad. Up above and east, west, north is all pretty nice. This is the Brain Trust. Who helped me design this. Like I said, I built every part, but trust me, I had a lot of help. Okay. Nice thing belonging to a club is you got lots of really smart people, smarter than you, who help you out willingly. So this is Scott Milligan, who designed the scope. This is Chris Houghton, and he designed all the electronics specifically for this. Well, he actually designed it for the one in New Hampshire and then copied it for, the one in New Hampshire is serial number 1. And the one in Gloucester, I think, is probably 40 or 50 because he started selling them and he retired from Intel. He used to design computer chips. And that's how I got the electronics done. And that's Paul Vallely. And they all were enormously helpful. So what do? After you get the dome done, you gotta collect a lot of scrap aluminum. I know every scrap yard in New England now. So I went around looking, but one thing I couldn't find, and there's the other thing you need some equipment. So here is a South Bend lathe that was made in 1954. And I got, back when CNCs first came out in the late 80s, no one wanted, analog lathes anymore. So the place in Lowell, Mass was basically just dumping it. They were going to give it to a junkyard for the scrap price. So I found out about it, got it down here, and George East, who has a similar lathe, helped me recondition it, and it works great. So that's my lathe. It's a 12-foot bed and a 24-inch swing because it's a lifted 16. And that's it came from Polaroid Corporation that Ken Lowney got for me when they were shutting down on 128, and he bought it for the scrap price and got it sent over to my house because they were selling it to employees for the scrap price. So those are the main equipment. That's how everything.
What would be the scrap price?
At the time, the lathe I think was about 600 or 700, but it cost $1,000 to have a rigger bring it.
Right, yeah.
And the milling machine was about 500.
Jeez.
But it's $20,000 worth of equipment for scrap price. I've been using it all these years. The next thing I needed, I couldn't find a big disc. I went to like 10 scrap yards. I needed a really big disc. Peter Below, anyone know him? Like I said, it's good to have. Peter worked at the time, he was a quality engineer for iTech. And this is a centrifuge table. And he said that, because I sent a notice out to the club saying, anyone know where I can get a big disc for a polar axle? And so Peter said they're taking apart some old centrifuges because they got bigger ones. So he got me this this is a centrifuge table. What they would do is screw in the chips, silicon chips, spin this at 10,000 RPM, and then dope the chips. Okay. So this is balanced to literally within $1,000. It cost iTech in the early 80s, $18,000 for this one piece of aluminum. It also has channels to allow cooling water to go through it. I mean, it's exquisitely made. But they were throwing it out, and it's good for 10,000 RPM. I'm using it at 1 RP day, perfectly fine. But it was just the right size. You can see the back; it's just perfectly machined. So I started putting these together. Here's the base. Built these rollers, and in the back end, have a Timken. It's 7 inches. It's a millimeter, about roughly 7 inches. Timken double brace bearing that I found out in a catalog cost like $1,200. I got it for $10 on the swap table. It's the whole thing. And it's designed to hold tons. It's not holding up tons here, so it makes this So between the three rollers, I got a nice polar axle. I couldn't find a bigger gear. Now this obviously I bought. So I took the one from Lynnfield for the 16-inch, which is over there right now, by the way. It's a little underpowered, but I eventually got that fixed. I'll give that story when I come to that slide. So it had a bow in it. I thought that was going to be a problem, and I put that across, but it turned out it's perfect because by having a bow, it's incredibly rigid. Okay, and it's not pure aluminum; it's a aluminum alloy that makes it very stiff. So it worked out perfectly. And the arms couldn't be made out of aluminum. I was told by George East they would flex too much, so that's out of steel. Here it is put together, painted. Next, you got to have the rest of the scope. Now, here's the part that's going to be the deck. The cell will be made of aluminum, but these are rather special. I was looking around for carbon fiber. I was told by Scott, because it goes through an intermediate focus, I only have 25 thousandths. It can expand and contract. Okay, otherwise it causes problems. And so that's the one disadvantage of a relay scope that has a focus point in the middle. But the way to get around that is to have non-expansile material. So we didn't get that. I was looking around for a carbon fiber. And at that time, Boeing was buying up all the carbon fiber in the country. Price skyrocketed. Fortunately, Paul Vallely had a source. When they build satellites, they make two of them always. One goes into space and one on the ground. And they he tells me they flip a coin, which one goes up, so there's no cheating. And this way, if anything goes wrong, they study the heck out of it on the ground until they reproduce the fault and then send a correction, right? So the one on the ground, this belonged to the Halo satellite. They decommissioned it. It's a spy satellite as well. He said when they decommission it, they just put in the trash. So we went over there and we cut it up. So I got all this carbon fiber, which is not the little stuff you're thinking about. This is really thick. This cost the government a pretty penny. It's rated for 14G takeoff. Again, I'm not doing that, so it's stiff enough for me. It's not a real telescope unless you can walk through it. So here's some design things. Everything was put on a Cray computer, friends at MIT, and checked deflection and everything. Okay, and here's some of the drawings that came out of that. Like I said, I got a lot of. If I had to pay for all this help, this scope would cost millions. But they all work for beer and pizza. That's the key. Like I said, you can. So here is, by the way, the push pull. I use the push pull on this scope. So heavy duty push pull. Use a carbon fiber, and that aligns and stays locked in place. I don't like springs. They always give a little bit. Just to give you an idea, there's 582 parts that went into the scope. And just the central corrector had 4 corrector lenses. So I had lens cells, carbon fiber tubes, all had to be put together. So it's like 25 parts just for that one central area, painted and starting to be put together, and the individual lenses. One's a doublet and there's 2 singles. And that's what it looks like put together. Okay, again, that's 26 parts for just that one stretch there. So next needed a blank. That was a bit of a story. Scott was insisting that we couldn't just use an ordinary flat blank. Fortunately, he works in the industry. He knew Peter Wagnus, who, anyone know Roger Angel, a really big 8-meter. Okay. Arizona, the Mirror Lab. So Peter worked for him. And then just about the time we were building this, he decided to leave Roger Angel and start up his own company, making smaller ones for industry and for universities. And he needed a test blank, and Peter knew this. So he said, how about you do us a favor and cast this for us? So he basically just charged me the cost of the glass. Okay, so I got an incredible deal. So he cast this and diamond generated the surface. Does this look familiar? And you know about the 8.2 meters, right? So he didn't want to spend a lot of time designing it. So he took the designs for the 8.2 meters from the University of Arizona and just shrunk it down to a 1/10 scale model. So I can say my mirror blank is a 1/10 scale model of the 8-meter telescopes in the world. That's basically the same thing. Here is the mold he made. Then he melted glass just like they do in the mirror lab. Now he didn't spin it. He rough diamond generated it for us because he had the equipment. But it had to be annealed slowly. So it sat 3 weeks in an oven. And here it is 10 minutes after it was born. And there it is. So it's a 1 3/8 inch on the end and in the center 5.5 inches. And his original design was to simply mount it all from the center of bracing. Turned out because it went from 24 to 36, we had a little bit of a problem. But I'll get to that in a minute. So made a tool, and you're not going to get another piece of glass that big. So you make it out of that dental material that you make casts with, and then epoxy glass squares on it. And here it is with the grinding grit on top of it. I had built my own big mirror cell, but he had one set up that was nicest. So basically I went to Hubbardston where he lives back and forth for a number of times, and together we worked on it. And again, the sphere is easy. It just machine basically does the work. Here it is being ground. Here is the pitch for polishing. Oh, actually, we did a pre-polish with pads first, and then we went to the pitch. Here it's being polished away. That's Scott looking over the mostly polished, wasn't quite finished polished out, but you can see that it's polished now. And then he tested it on that. And we found a little bit of a problem. Because this was scaled up, basically it's double the size from a 24-inch. He had some deflection on the outer end. But fortunately, friends at MIT used the ray trace program and figured out the best way to support it to eliminate that problem. And we ended up with this blue line when it's supported properly. So it is a true 16th wave. Otherwise, it would have just barely made quarter wave again. So the way to fix it was an 18-point suspension, but because it's cavities in the back, it had to be, it's not supported by simply pressing on it. This is RTV 160, which incredible material. Paul Lally, that's how they use the scopes in space. Can't rely on gravity to rest it. They use this material, which Paul got for me. And it zero expansion and contraction, has just enough give. So the expansion coefficient is different from glass and aluminum. It doesn't matter. It's okay. But it's strong enough that it completely binds and you can lift the mirror up with it.
Oh.
So that and it's low outgas, and that was the other thing. So it doesn't coat the mirror when you're using it. Here's a close-up. Okay. And, you know, built so it's got the flexure on it. And here is the final product. And for those of you that know interferograms, this is a 20th wave primary. There's no way in the world I was going to get a 20th wave Newtonian primary. That was never going to happen, even if I lived to 100, polishing every night the rest of my life. So, but he was brilliant. By doing a sphere, you can make a sphere perfect. And then you use correctors. And now you wouldn't do all that work for an 8-inch. It's just way too much work for an 8-inch. But for a 32, that saved me a couple of years of work. because we did 6 months, we had a perfect sphere. And then I bring it to Tony Pereira down in Long Island, who coded it for me. Hung upside down in the coding machine. Here it is, newly coded. And here is the testing on it. So you can see he did enhanced aluminum with that six coats of titanium oxide with what was the other one? Silicon and titanium alternating. And with that, he's able to get something like 97% reflection. And then when you include the fact that all the correctors lose only 0.3% per surface, I'm getting roughly 93–94% of the available light. If it wasn't for those coatings, if it wasn't for this special coating here, it would have been down about 50%. Here's the Milligan secondary. It's O'Hara glass, special index of refraction that he ordered. He made the flat. The flat is perfect, 20th wave. And now what? So the scope is done. The parts are all made. What do you do now? Now you invite another work party over, and you get slave labor and put everything together. I do feed them though. So here it is, bring stuff up into the dome. Here is the carbon fiber tubing, and originally this was aluminum. I found that it didn't flex to the eye, but I always had some differences when I went from one end of the sky to the other. So I eventually replaced that and made it out of carbon fiber, because the other flaw in the scope is it has to be perfectly collimated. I mean perfectly collimated. So any deflection is a problem. So to eliminate that, I added more struts, a central band, you'll see in a minute, and this is replaced with carbon fiber. And by doing that, it is now way overbuilt for the supports and light as a feather on the front end. And by doing that, everything works out great. Here is the mirror before we put it into the cell. I'm a physician. I knew we were going to get this stuff. We don't want any fingerprints or dust on the mirror surface. So the way I designed it, here is the deck axle holding this. You can bring the mirror cell after the mirror is put into it, up into it. I bought a hydraulic table. Just bring it up, tighten it up. This way no one accidentally drops anything, which would be a bad thing. And here it is in place. The first step for collimating is I built this special piece, which I have and use occasionally if I have to take anything apart. And I make sure everything along the axis is collimated before I do anything else. Once that's locked in place, that can't move. And then for the secondary, do the push-pull here and get the mirror collimated onto the Milligan secondary. And here is the putting the cells together. Again, there's a doublet and two singles. There's these are 6 inches in diameter. The Milligan is 7.8 inches in diameter. So here is one of the lenses. Looks like it's a mirror, doesn't it? When you turn it 90 degrees, it disappears. It's totally magical. I don't know how this works. I've read about it 20 times. I still don't understand how it works, but it works. So here it is. I added more carbon struts. I added a rigid midsection to basically fixate everything. And now it's carbon fiber up here. Now it works great, and I can go from one end of the sky to the other without any noticeable deflection. There is the mirror in place. Now, a lot of the corrections done from the Mangan. The Mangan has to be at the right distance, so that's Z direction. It has to be centered properly, so I needed an XY stage. Okay, so you get X, Y, and Z. And then you have to be able to tilt it in any direction. So it has 7 degrees of freedom. So that takes me 2 nights to collimate. But once it's locked in, and I built this system where I lock everything in place. And once it's locked in, it's good for a year or two. Every once in a while, I give it a slight tweak, but it's very rigid and it works. So that's how, I mean, that alone, this contraption here is about, I don't know, I forget, 30, 40 parts.
Question on the collimation.
Yeah.
Are you actually doing star testing the collimate?
Yes. Yep. Open
No
the dome.
lasers, no black magic,
No,
old fashioned star testing.
well, I use a laser from the base just to make sure everything's collimated to the Mangan.
Okay,
But this requires star testing. There's no other way to do it. Here's my control room. And on cold winter nights, I can control everything from here. And then quite a few years ago, with the magic of being able to control this from my laptop, I can use the laptop anywhere in the house and control the telescope, which is fantastic. When I first did it, I ran downstairs, showed my wife, and I said to her, "Look, I can control it from anywhere now." And she just looked up at me with no excitement in her voice and says, "Anywhere but the bedroom, get out." You really deflated me that night. So below the deck, this is why I wanted to raise it 6 feet. The pier goes a few feet below the floor, and that's because the house had to be situated along this axis. True north was that way. So I built up a stage, and it sits on this aluminum stage. Nothing's touching that. It's filled with fiberglass,
it's like,
and yeah. So I go upstairs, lower the trapdoor, and this is a dummy terminal. I can control things from here, from the control room, or from anywhere in the house from my laptop. Basically, if I'm taking a long exposure, I just sit in my living room, do other stuff, watch the guide star. And as long as the guide star's staying steady, I'm good. If something goes wrong, I go in the dome. I don't have to put on boots and shovel. This is how I turn the dome. Here is the back end. Now notice the size. This is 15.5. It tracked well, but needed a lot of corrections. I was tracking like every half second because it just was a bit underpowered. So I had, a few years after I initially built it, I called buyers. Everyone know what buyers is? This is a buyer's gear. And this is, by the way, one of his first. Okay, I bought it way back in the early 80s. He made gears so accurate that in the 70s, he wasn't allowed to sell them outside the US. In fact, at first, he could only sell them to the military. Then he started a company when that contract was over and thought, who really needs accurate drives? And it dawned on him, astronomers. So that's why he started building gears for astronomers. And this is one of his first. I got it at a good price then, but for a 24-inch gear, he wanted something like 10 or 12,000. I said, that's too much. I'll stay with this. About 5 years ago, he's now 91. And out of the blue, my wife and I are sitting having coffee on Saturday morning. Out of the blue, Byers calls me. And he goes, "I remember 10 years ago you wanted a 24-inch gear." Yeah. He goes, "Well, someone ordered one. I'm closing down my shop. You never picked it up. I'll give it to you for 2,000. Okay. So I got a 24-inch Byers. This is literally a gem. It's beautifully made. So, but how do you put it on when the scope's already up? Well, you invite a bunch of engineer friends over And they figured out a way to lift this, secure it to the dome in multiple places with jacks, and we just took apart the base. So here is a number of people you may recognize, I won't name them all, but we took apart the base and then added the new piece. And so now I have a 24-inch, 23.5-inch drive. And there's the new cover for it. And now it works beautifully. I mean, I still make corrections because of atmosphere. I mean, no matter, once you get to a big scope, it's not like small scopes where you won't notice the twinkling. I mean, when you're twinkling at 600-700 power, it twinkles. It's all over the place. So you have to chase it, and that's why you're correcting, not because of inaccuracies in the gear anymore, just because of atmospherics. So here's the motors. It's servo motors that work well, that have built-in encoders. So I have 27,500 steps for one circle. And here is, I needed counterweights for the stuff I wanted to put on top. Then for the deck, I got this gear. It's not a buyer's, but it works fine for a deck. That's in place. I had encoders, which I don't even use anymore because the encoders on that are better. Then each one of those motors has its own mini computer. It translates number of steps into what you need in order for proper tracking. That is run through the main computer and controls everything by higher level commands. This is the Chris Houghton's material. It's his astrometric instruments. He's now selling them. He retired. This is the only thing he does now. So the next thing, this is Gaston Baudet. I can never pronounce his name properly. He's French, but he was living in Philadelphia at the time. He saw my article in Sky and Tel on the telescope, and out of the blue he calls me and says, I have a new system. Instead of an off-axis guider, I've developed an on-axis guider, which is made, which would be perfect for your scope. Says, can I come up and test with you for a weekend? I said, sure. It sounded interesting. So this is when I had my older STL camera. So this is his equipment. I'm serial number 2. He's got serial number 1. And instead of trying to find, especially in a big scope, find a small rim, find a star in that rim, you all done off-axis guiding. This has a diagonal mirror that transmits everything above 750 nanometers, basically the mid-deep infrared, and everything short of that goes up to the camera. So, and usually if you're going to take pictures, you want to black out the infrared anyways and blow it to your stars. So this is a perfect solution. So what you do is you just move an XY stage with your guide camera, and you can find, there's got to be stars somewhere in the field. You find that star, and it takes me literally just a minute to find a star, lock it in, and guide with it. It's beautiful. So, but he wanted to test it. So I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to point straight up because everyone get good pictures straight up. So I'm going to go for M83. That was the first picture with that this setup. I said, it's low in the sky. It's only 12 degrees above the horizon. This is the acid test. You can get a good picture on that because I've been trying several times, and always the stars are bloated. It's low on the horizon. This twinkling is not like this. It's like this through 4 or 5 atmospheres. So we put it on. So he was kind of sweating and saying, geez, can you pick something easy to start? So we put it on M83. The first sub after 5 minutes comes through, and it is pinpoint stars. I looked at him and said, I want one. And he said, it's yours. So I got serial number 2. And that's what I've been using ever since. If you have trouble with off-axis guiding on-axis guiding is the way. He shows up at Neath every year. You can see his equipment there. This is my current setup. It's a ZWO 6200. It's a CMOS. It has it's a 24 by 35 millimeter chip, and it's beautiful. Works great. In fact, they're going to start seeing my pictures on the ZWO site. They've contacted me several times and said sure. So here is the filter wheel, the on-axis guider. And I built I should say I don't want to cheat here. I built a focuser, but I got this from what's a guy in Colorado who got burned out in forest block. Anyways, I saw that and I got a very good price on it. I wanted to motorize things, so he gave me that whole system for a pretty good price.
Sykes, I think it was, Sykes or something, out in Colorado,
I think
north of
it's-
Colorado Springs.
Yeah, he got burned out with
Yeah.
a forest fire a few years ago. He'll come to me. I'm blocking on the name right now. But anyways, it works great.
I'm sorry?
It's a 3-inch focuser. So here is the scope covered up. Back end, that MEAD, which I don't use on piggyback anymore. It just didn't work. I sold that a long time ago. So I got the 6-inch refractor, which I use a lot. I use the solar work, and I can change that to an 8-inch f2. There it is with the Celestron 8-inch, and I've got one of those f2 adapters on it. And of course you need flats, dome flats, saves a lot of time. How did I do that? I was trying to think of how to light it up. I couldn't get it even. Then it dawned on me. I got empty space here. So these are 4 LEDs. And I just plug in and it pointing straight at it, and it evenly illuminates now, and I get perfect flats all the time, anytime at night I want them. Encoders on the bottom of the RA. That's how I open and close the dome. What?
Is that marine apparatus?
Yeah, well, in effect, yeah, but it runs off AC. And then how do you clean it? That could be, I can't just take it out and run it under a sink, right? Or, so what I do is first, these are special coatings. You don't want anything scratching the coating. So the first thing I do is I blow it with carbon dioxide, cylinder gas, get all the loose stuff off. Then I spray what's called blue coat on it. And I was given that by the coaters saying this is the best way to do it. So I spray it on, you wait 30 minutes, it turns into a gel. Then you touch it with tape and just peel it off. That takes any grit off the surface, because the final, and that works once a year fine. Every few years, I got to do a little bit more because there's like a haze that develops on it. And then I spray it with distilled water with a tiny bit of Windex and dishwashing cleaner, I'm sorry, just a few drops, and douse it really well with spray bottles, and then just lightly touch with cotton balls, just like you would do with a small mirror. And that, what? I thought someone said something. And then that cleans it nice. In fact, I just did a cleaning about a month and a half ago. So here it is, the final product on a hilltop. It's a good spot for an observatory. This picture was in National Geographic. They made me spin the dome.
Okay.
And you can, and it makes it look like the dome disappeared. Interesting photo. Inside. Observing. Okay, now give another 5 minutes to show you some pictures taken through it, or okay. So this is my asteroid taken a few years ago. I should have two, so you can see the mood, but anyways.
What magnitude was it, Mario?
It's 18th mag, it's in the middle of the asteroid belt. It will never hit the Earth, so we're safe. So some research projects, I mean, I built the scope this big primarily because when I was in college, I was interested in deep sky galaxies. And my thought was to try to develop the 3D scaling of the nearby universe. Margaret Geller from Harvard, you must know her name. She did the research I was thinking of, because she probably did a much better job than I ever would have. And she's been at the house. In fact, she was kind of funny because we were at a dinner with the AVSO one night, and she goes, and I'm congratulating her on the work. She did groundbreaking work and figured out the three-dimensional distribution of galaxies, which is something I was originally interested in. And she goes, but I've never looked through a telescope. That's what she said to me. I mean, come look through mine. Anyway, she was happy. That was the first time she looked through a telescope in her life.
Wow.
Anyways, so I get a lot more fun than she has. She just looks at numbers all the time. So here's AVSO as president of it. And this is CH Cygni. I contributed data to that. In fact, greened my numbers. And it's a cataclysmic variable that that's just kind of erratic. There's hardly any periodicity to it. I think it's because it has three stars, and one of them is dumping material onto the primary star, and the other one affects that dump. Anyways, it's completely erratic. So Hubble's variable M31, V1, his famous V1. The Hubble team wanted for their 25th year, they wanted to get a image of that in honor of Hubble. And they asked the AVSO to reset, because it's a Cepheid variable. Hubble discovered, he was looking for novas, and he found the Cepheid variable. And that's another great story, because the Harvard team, Shapley at the time, thought the universe was one giant galaxy. But because of Henrietta Leavitt studying Cepheid variables in the Magellanic Cloud, they knew they had to be the same distance. She was able to figure out a period luminosity curve, right? You all know that story. So that was well-established science at that time, and it's all due to Henrietta Leavitt, who didn't get credit in her lifetime, unfortunately, because she was a woman, right? So the director, Pickering, took all the credit,
Right.
But he did, in later life, credit her. But she did all the work, groundbreaking work, and it was her observations and study of it that led to the Cepheid variable. Well, Hubble, looking for, here's Hubble, always with his pipe, thought he was looking for supernovas, and he noticed that this is his photo. Notice he said nova, and then he scratched it out with variable with an exclamation mark. He realized after a couple of years of taking the same field, this was a Cepheid variable. So the story goes, he sent a turret note to Shapley saying, I found a Cepheid variable, and this proves that this is another galaxy. And for the people who were in the room when Shapley read it, Shapley looked up and goes, my universe just disappeared. He immediately recognized this was good science, and Hubble was correct. But this was the discovery photo. Anyway, so they wanted new images of it. These three stars, that's the variable star. That's my picture. And if you think about it, this is with the 100-inch hooker.
Yes.
And it was all an emulsion on plates. Look at this. This is the best that could be done in 1920. This is a relatively small amateur telescope nowadays. Far better resolution, right? And I didn't have to spend 12 hours in the cage holding my urine like Hubble did all night long This was a 5-minute exposure stacked over an hour. And they get much better detail. That's 18th mag red wave. But this is my favorite right here, this little thing here. In the 90s, I was involved with so most of this work was actually with my scope in New Hampshire, but I kept it up with this scope. Gamma ray bursters. And here's my first gamma ray burster. In fact, it turned out that that was 10 billion light years away when they studied it. And then a guy from Texas who I know, no, 10.5 billion light years away, 6 months later, found a 10.7 billion gamma ray burst. I'm still number 2, but who remembers number 2? So anyways, exoplanets, done a bunch of those. My first one was with the Harvard team, grad student, blocking his name. He's an MIT professor now. Anyways, he looking at the data from satellite data, they found this one very bizarre data that was not like other transits. So his instructor said, contact me and see if I can get photos of it and do some tracking because it is unusual. So here's my first one. Now, most you've seen transits, they barely dip a little bit and then go back up, right? Here's the 7 control stars. This is not a little dip. Okay, no one's seen anything like that. In fact, I thought something wrong with my scope or my equipment or something, but I did a number of nights and it always showed up like that. And so it turned out this was a white dwarf that was eating a planetoid. It had falling apart in the Roche limit, and the theory is that by falling apart, it created a cloud around the white dwarf. And every time that cloud went in front of the star, you got this huge dip. So just by luck, I finally find an exoplanet, and it gets destroyed by a star. Easy come, easy go. Then the Hubble team thought that was a great star to study. The Hubble can't look through the Earth, so the Hubble data is the black, okay, and mine is the that color over here. Anyways, we had a collaboration, and that ended up being a number of papers written on that. I wrote a paper on that for Sky and Tel a few years back. And another one I liked was a transit of Triton. It just happened. The Triton went right over, not over my observatory, but the edge went over my observatory. And see the dotted line? That is the atmosphere of Triton. And that is the surface of Triton. It goes right over my observatory. So they came over and wanted me to take a transit of Triton occulting a star. Here's my data. Okay. And based on that, they figured out that the gradient of the atmosphere, the surface was just missed, the gradient of the atmosphere, and that was the first measurement of Triton's atmosphere. So you can do a lot of good science with that stuff. Here's my Saturn picture just to show you can't get good planetary pictures unless you're on a large scope, unless your optics are pretty good.
No strokes.
M30, M51.
Amazing.
M81. 3C273, it's about 2.5, 3 billion light years away, which is a active nuclear galaxy and a black hole. And you see this right here? This is a spike. That's the jet coming out of the black hole. So
They used to call it.
here's one of my deep fields. I like to do those. This is Able 2151, which is in southern Hercules. And everything you see here is a galaxy except for a few stars. There's a few stars like this is a star. But everything, even these little things, they're all galaxies. There's something like 400 or 500 galaxies in this one picture, including a number of collisions, like this one and those and these over here. It's one of my favorite fields. Now, to show you how good this is, how many people would like someone shining a flashlight in your scope? You'd be annoyed, right? Because of that field stop and the way the scopes are designed, this is Leo 1. And people who've seen Leo 1, it's right next to Alpha Leo, right?
Regulus?
Regulus, yeah. It's right next to Regulus, which is just off the field. No rays. I could never get a picture of this in any of my other scopes before, and I always wanted to get. This is Leo 1, right next to Regulus, not a problem because anything that's even slightly off axis doesn't go through that field stop and doesn't ruin my pictures. So I took that as a test photo of how good the system was. I called up Scott and said, this works. This is 891. 4565, two of my favorite edge-on galaxies. And by the way, you can see the hump. You see like a double hump? That's real. That it turns out that that is a barred galaxy, but we can't see the bar because it's on edge. But the bar goes diagonally across this way, which is why you got a double hump there. I'm able to resolve that. Some of my favorites, this is going to be in a Sky and Tell article next June on multiple galaxies in one field. And this is one of them I'm using. This is the triplet in Draco. And this is Stefan's quintet. So I'm able to get good image scale, which is why I built the big scope. Okay, I'm not looking for M galaxies anymore. I want to see stuff really deep. So this is 4.7, 470 million light years away. And it's interesting. They call this Stefan's quintet, but this is a foreground galaxy. It turned out it has nothing to do with these. These two are merging. This one's starting to merge, and this one's interacting as well. The fifth galaxy is actually this one. And although this was originally part of Stefan's quintet, it's now recognized as a foreground galaxy. Next time you look at it, NGC 660, which is a polar galaxy, which is two spirals, and this one's spearing right through it. And whenever I go deep, what I like is every deep, this one I had to go deep to get the edges. Notice everything in the background. There's always these galaxies. It just always amazes me how many galaxies are out there. 1097, one of my favorite bars. This is part of the rosette. Okay. Now the rosette, is that size, but with a 32-inch, you can get it nice and personal with some of these buck bodies. This is Thor's helmet, 2359.
Oh, jeez.
Get some nice resolution, right? Size does matter in astronomy. So here is my view of 6888. This is a 4-hour compilation because I wanted to get the faint outside stuff. This is a jet, by the way, coming out. See it? There's a jet going back. This is a Wolf-Rayet star with a jet going back, which is lighting up the gas in the background. It's not a star that exploded. It's a jet lighting it up. Here's my view of the Veil, 6960 part. This is with narrowband imaging. Another part of the Veil. It's just a great object, isn't it? And the deeper you go into it, just the more shock waves there are all over the place. Here's my view of the Eagle. And here's the Pillars of Creation. The they're not green. I like real color. I did tweak color a little bit. I mean, the background is slightly bluer because I wanted to bring out the pillars. But that's my complaint about the Hubble team. They make everything green. But I know why they did it, because the eye is sensitive to green. They want to highlight the stuff. So they take H alpha and make it green. But I like the Canada, France, Hawaii palette, which is H. Helix. And this is the elephant trunk. A little closer than you usually would expect, right? Notice this star form right there. It's creating its own bubble. Ring. 6781, which is in the eagle net. I'm sorry, the Vulpecula, maybe Vulpecula. And this is a SH2 200s. It's really photographed. I took a stab at it. It's really faint. It's called a Bear Claw Nebula. I don't know why it's got those lines across it. And here's a really faint planetary, Able 39. The Trifid can resolve the 3 stars in the center. And this is through my 6-inch in California. And I took this just a week and a half ago. This is 7814. That's in southwestern Pegasus.
Oh, jeez.
All right, I just want to let you know that I'm in National Geographic this month. I didn't write that article, but I'll send it. You can read it. It was very well done. I was interviewed for it. And I do a lot of observing. So I'll stop there.
Wow. I mean, how often do you play a lottery? Because, I mean, I know you have connections,
Yeah.
that's what you need, right? But
A lot
It's like
of
you
big
just-
club that has lots of
things
spots.
have just fallen to you.
Yeah.
Without you even asking.
I'm not hiding that.
It's good to have friends.
Question, I have a question about, I mean, I know where you're located, okay?
Speak louder,
What-
Dave.
I'm sorry?
Speak louder so
Oh.
people can hear.
The weather in your area, I mean, you're really close to the water, that area gets a lot of fog, moisture. Well, you know, do you have a problem in the dome?
I'm 160 feet above sea level. And that usually stays low. It's just not really been a problem for me.
No? Huh?
Any other questions?
I noticed the way you put the scope together, it looks like the inclination is fixed. So I'm assuming that couldn't be moved somewhere without having to.
It takes a crew of 6 people to take it apart. I ain't moving it unless it's a real good reason.
Yeah,
Are there any baffles in the transfer?
What's that?
Baffle. Are there any baffles?
No, the whole tube is a baffle. And on the front end, there is a field stop. That acts as that's the baffle.
What's your limiting magnitude?
Deepest I've gone is 23 mag.
Where does that, is that a Dutch name for your observatory? Where does that come from?
Wingaersheek, it's an Indian name.
Indian name, okay.
Yeah, the beach area is called
Okay.
Wingaersheek, but it's from the original Indians in Gloucester. That's what I'm told.
How much time do you spend on each image roughly? Or is it just a channel?
If I'm just doing black and white, I can get a pretty good image in 1 hour, because I want to get detail. In 5 minutes, you get the image, but you need a stack of it really good. And if I really want to keep her with color, anywhere from 3 to 5 hours.
That's not.
Yeah.
What are you using for processing, like PixInsight or Photoshop?
Sorry, yeah.
You find the processing to be easier when you have such high quality data?
Yes. Nothing beats good data. All right.
Any other questions?